Welcome back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Now, today I am joined by the beautiful Jennifer Reeder. Jennifer, how you doing today?
I'm good, thanks.
Hey, I am so excited to have you here. And before I want to talk about why we're here, I want to talk about you a little bit. Jennifer is a Chicago-based filmmaker that was recently named by Bong Joon-ho as one to watch in the 2020s. Your films have been shown in festivals and museums around the world, including Sundance, Berlin, South by Southwest, and the Whitney Biennial. So what has this been like for you? When did you know that being a filmmaker is what you wanted to do with the rest of your life?
Oh gosh, I mean, it was a long time ago when I was in college trying to kind of find my way through an art department where I thought perhaps that's where I would sort of find my misfits. And I took a sculpture class that I nearly failed because I am not a sculptor. But that professor steered me towards a class that was sort of an expanded, like video and performance, a little mashup of all sorts of things. And we had to make videotapes in that class. And I picked up a video camera and it felt like I had kind of recovered a phantom limb. And so then I just swiftly pivoted into the film department and, have been making images move ever since.
So with this, you said you went to under an art major. When you were started doing film, is this something that you wanted to do at a young age, you kind of let go of, or was it something that once you had that camera for the first time, you're like, oh, this is what I've been missing out on my whole life?
I actually have been, what I thought I was going to do when I was little was be a professional ballet dancer. So I still haven't let go of the bun. But I was a serious ballet dancer up through college. And I think that's partially why my instructor said, you might like this class. It's video and performance. I know you have this background as a dancer. And honestly, I feel so much like still my filmmaking is really related to my background as a dancer. It feels a lot like choreography. And I think of like the frame as the stage and I still use a lot of music, and I think I edit pretty lyrically, and there's so many great kind of classical ballets that are really pretty gnarly, mythologies, backstabbing and death, brutal deaths, so it felt like I had not been making films as a young person, but I was involved in a kind of storytelling with a frame, and I feel like I'm still doing that.
Well, and ballet is its own form of art as well. And like I've said, art is not just a drawing on a canvas. It is not just paint on a canvas. Art is subjective. Art is music. It is ballet. It is film. It is everything. And as long as you're making art, I'm happy for you and I'm so proud of you. And a lot of the things you've done, that's why we're here today. I was able to connect with you through doing this. And do you have anything coming down the pipeline? I know there's a lot that goes on with NDAs and stuff like that, so it's hard to talk about it sometimes, but do you have anything coming up that you can actually talk to us about yet? Or
I can tell you that I've got I'm in post right now with a new feature-length film that I wrote and directed that is a kind of coming of age cat people. So okay. It's a pretty righteous kind of feminist horror film. And that's about all I can say about it right now, but it'll be released in 2023, hopefully after it has a nice kind of robust festival and theatrical life.
Awesome. Well, the best part about this is, guys, you don't have to wait for me to update you on when all this NDA stuff is over, because you can follow Jennifer Reeder on all her social media links by clicking the links down here in the description. So make sure you're following her on social media, not just for her newest film coming out, but for everything she has coming down the pipeline. So that way you could check out all the things that she's working on here in the future. Now, Jennifer, we know what you're doing now, and we kind of have an idea of what you got going on in the future. But here for a little bit, I want to take it back to the past and talk about what got you started in the horror genre, your first horror movie. And Jennifer, the first horror movie that you watched was?
Carrie.
What an amazing start to your horror life.
Yeah.
And I'm sure this movie, and I've said this before, with movies like this and The Exorcist, I'm sure watching this through the scope of a young lady, it hits you a little bit more than it would me watching as a young man, because I don't identify with a lot of what's happening in the blossoming of a young lady. So do you remember about how old you were the first time you had seen it?
Oh, I'm sure I was you know, much too young. I mean, I could have been, I don't know, like 7 or 8 or something like this. I mean, it comes out of having, you know, I've got older brothers who, you know, when my parents would go do fun adult things, they would leave me with them. And the older 2 of the 3 were pretty civilized. It was the brother who is he's about 8 years older than I am. So he was, you know, he was at a time and this was probably when Carrie came out whenever it eventually ended up on like the early forms of cable TV.
Mhm.
And you know, he was probably at an age when he, you know, it might have been appropriate for him to watch, for sure not appropriate for me to watch for all sorts of reasons. But he was in charge, and so that's what we watched. And yeah, some pretty, you know, I had a lot of questions for my mom, you know, when when she came back.
I'm sure that was a fun time for her trying to figure out why the hell are you asking me these questions? You watched what now?
Mhm.
So, and we've all been down there too. So we know that you watched it with your brother for the first time at a very young age, and at a young age like that, things can soak in a little bit different than if you're watching them as adult and you really understand what you're seeing. So,
Mhm.
do you remember which scene it was that affected you the most?
Well, I mean, I think as an image maker now, for sure, it's that iconic, you know, her Carrie, you know, in her beautiful, you know, pink satin prom dress, just drenched in pig's blood, you know, that really iconic image that really she stays in that look for, I mean, at least 15 minutes or something like that,
Yeah,
even more than that, in that whole prom sequence, in her whole walk home. You know, I mean, it's even it's kind of drawn out when she gets into that bathtub and the water turns kind of like foamy pink, you know. So you know, and I think that image comes up a lot, especially during, you know, during this time of year, just this young woman, you know, blonde and pretty at prom, just drenched in blood. It's a really, you know, it's really startling and iconic. And of course, you know, it's also really powerful because she goes from being Carrie who got laughed at to being Carrie who just burns the town down.
yeah. And that whole sequence too, like when you have her walking through the gymnasium and the fires happening, like it is just wow. Like it is wow. This is when it really kicks it into gear. So a question I ask when I talk about Carrie, because I feel like this is pretty much a 50-50 split here. Is Carrie a villain or a hero in your eyes?
I think she's a hero. I really do. You know, I mean, it has to do with like, I mean, that whole end sequence, of course, is bookended by how the film begins, you know, which is also kind of her covered in blood in a different way, her covered in her own menstrual blood,
Mhm.
at a moment when, because her mother has raised her in such an suppressed, you know, household, that she
Yeah.
doesn't understand what's happening to her. And she's genuinely terrified, you know, thinks that she's sort of bleeding to death. And of course, you know, I mean, not to be TMI, but, you know, I saw this before I really understood what menstruation was too. So I also, like Carrie, thought, wow, I think she's dying from the inside out. Um,
Right.
and you know, there's a, you know, it's a great, I mean, she's a hero because it is a great, you know, revenge tale, kind of classic revenge tale of like the underdog misfit, you know, picked on um girl who gets to you know, pretty profoundly take out, you know, the bullies at the end of the day. And it's brutal, you know, I mean, that, you know, you know, when the two, you know, primary, you know, dumpers of pig's blood, you know, John Travolta and his date, you know, Nancy Allen get flipped over in that car. I mean, you don't survive that, you know. So, you know, Carrie is definitely, you know, a killer. But as far as like, you know, women in horror, she's, you know, she's a hero.
Yeah. And I see both sides because hey, there was still innocent people at that prom that probably got killed for no reason,
That's true.
including the gym
And
teacher.
shooting the
So
gym teacher, you're right.
yeah, so there are definitely both sides of the coin,
Mhm.
but I have daughters, man. If they were treated like that in the world that we have today, that's a wrap. So
I mean, we can blame that on like systemic bullying or something, like, thinking about words that we use right now, how like the whole system failed Carrie. So even though it seems like from the outside they were innocent people at that gym, they all played some hand in it.
Well, I mean, you also have like the principal, like when she's getting in trouble or not getting in trouble, but getting sent home, and he can't remember her name. He keeps calling her a different name the whole time he's talking to her, and the fear that comes across her face when she finds out that they're calling their mom, because like at her young age, she doesn't have an escape. Back when we were kids, we had an escape. If we were getting bullied at school, we went home, we had a decent home life, everything was okay. But, like in this movie, even when she goes home, it's just as scary. Get locked in that closet, looking up and seeing that statue of Jesus staring down at her. Like there's all these horrors that are going on at her house as well. So Carrie did get the remake treatment. Did you watch the Carrie remake, and were you a fan?
I didn't watch it. I mean, I'm a little bit of a Carrie purist. I just thought, why remake it? I mean, I'm a big Sissy Spacek fan, and I think that she just is that part and I think, speaking of Carrie's home life, I just think that, Piper Laurie in that role as Carrie's mother is also, just, totally iconic. And so I'm stubborn like that. I'm a Gemini, so I sort of feel like, that's not to say that there's other remakes of films that I like that I haven't seen out of curiosity, but Carrie in particular, it's like, it's under my skin. So I'm a Carrie 78 loyalist.
Right. Well, I will say this in defense, it is pretty much a shot for shot remake, modernized, like using the cell phones when they're in the shower scene and, uploading the video to embarrass her a little more. But besides that, it's essentially a shot for shot remake. They did a very good job on it. Chloe Grace Moretz did a great job as Carrie. Julianne Moore did a great job as the mother. But it was very hard for me. And I'm not saying anything about Sissy, because Sissy is amazing and she's a beautiful, beautiful person. But it was hard for me to believe that Chloe Grace Moretz was this picked on, bullied young lady. It was hard for me to envision that. So maybe the casting just wasn't great. She did a great job in it, but it was very unbelievable that she was that person. So now, obviously, you said you haven't watched the remake. I would recommend at least giving it a chance, but I do agree that 78 is the better film. So we talked about Carrie being your first horror movie and what that movie means to you. And in the grand scheme of things, it might have even influenced some of the things that you've done now in your own world. So what I want to know now is, my little buddy Ghostface is here, and he has a question for you. What's your favorite scary movie, Jennifer? What is your favorite horror movie of all time?
I would have to say Rosemary's Baby. I mean, maybe that's not quite like a classical horror. I mean, maybe it's like sort of more psychological. I would totally consider Rosemary's Baby a horror movie. 100%. There's nothing to me in this world scarier than the thought of being impregnated forcefully by the devil and having to give birth to the devil's child. And a lot of the scenery throughout that movie is absolutely horrifying. I would absolutely, for 100%, say that Rosemary's Baby is a horror movie. 100%. There's people that argue. Yeah, there's people that argue Jaws. Jaws isn't a horror movie. I'm like, are you serious? Like, there's literally nothing scarier in this world than Jaws. So, I mean, I tend to sort of be someone who's more affected and more scared by that kind of slow build of dread. For instance, that happens in both Carrie and in Rosemary's Baby. I even am a big fan of a very early Alfred Hitchcock film called Rebecca, which is it's about like the kind of ghost of this woman named Rebecca that you just think at any moment is going to sort of like rise up out of the lake and take everybody out. And it never gets that dramatic, but just this this growing tension throughout the film and this sense of dread is, for me, sticks with me longer than a kind of consistent, I don't know, decapitation or something like this. Even though I I appreciate a good bludgeoning. And I would say that a really recent favorite film of mine is a film from 2020 called Possessor,
Okay.
by Brandon Cronenberg,
Hmm.
the spawn of the great David Cronenberg, of who I'm also just a big fan. I was talking to somebody today about Scanners and how Scanners has been really influential to me. I mean, just speaking of like, pretty gnarly exploding heads. But
Yeah.
I thought that Possessor was both, was a really clever, kind of a sci-fi even, but with really kind of just shocking, like death scenes.
Oh, the body horror in that movie, you could tell it's Cronenberg. You could tell that,
Yeah.
he watched a lot of his own father's stuff growing up. Like the body horror in that. I didn't know that was done by one of Cronenberg's offspring. That's
Hmm.
amazing. I did not know that, but it makes
Hmm.
sense now that you say
Yeah.
it. Like I
And I,
definitely understand.
there was also a recent 2020 film that, I hope doesn't just stand out as something that clearly was made during COVID, but the 2020 film Host, that was all a kind of video conferencing. In 2021, and in this past March, I released another film on Shudder called Restless. That's a lot of like screen time. It's like a screen time film. So in doing research for that, a friend of mine was like, well, who wrote it? Who wrote Restless, rather, that I directed? He said, well, watch Host, and I was like, okay. So I turn it on, thank goodness, like in the middle of the day, all the lights are on in the house. And because that's like, what brilliant, jump scares, I would say,
Oh yeah.
and I thought that was, the fear in that is also really uncanny, because you just don't know what's where and who's what and who's controlling everything. So yeah, I think recent kind of like top 10s are Host and Possessor. But forever, Rosemary's Baby is on like my number one.
Well, Host is also a cautionary tale to never lie during a seance.
Right.
Always be truthful when you're doing a seance. So,
Mhm.
I've had a lot of fun with you, Jennifer, getting to know you a little bit better, getting to know how horror started for you and what pushes your buttons when it comes to the horror world. But before I let you go, I always end these with the same question. We're going to bounce back to Carrie. And what we're going to do here, Jennifer, is we're going to rank this on a skull count. Now,
Mm.
we're not ranking this movie on acting, production, score, direction, nothing like that. What we're doing here is strictly judging this movie on how much it affected you on first viewing. So 0 skulls being not effective, 5 being extremely effective. You can use half and quarter skulls anywhere in the middle. Jennifer, what would your ranking of 1978's Carrie be?
Oh, solid 5.
I figured it was, but I had to ask. If you don't ask, you don't know. And it really is a movie that I feel like it's aged very well.
Mhm.
Everything from the bullying to how things happen, and it's a movie that really, really breaks your heart. It's one of the movies that I've often compared to like The Exorcist and Pet Cemetery, where the experience you have watching Carrie as a child versus the experience of watching it as a father, to me,
Mhm.
were two completely different viewings of these films. And watching Carrie through the parental lens instead of the peer lens breaks my heart a little bit more. So when a movie is able to do that, and 20 years apart from watching, hit me in two completely different directions, they've really, really done their job. And they've made it so that you can, rewatch it as an adult versus as a child and have a completely different experience. I've just watched the same movie twice and had two completely different viewings. And I love when a film is able to do something like that and accomplish something like that.
Yeah, and I think it's like as a film, it's crafted so beautifully. I mean, that whole sequence after she gets, dumped with pig's blood, like the whole sound design just like bottoms out and
Yeah.
it's totally silent, and then people start just you can just like pointing and laughing, but you can't hear them laugh, and you just understand how humiliated she is, as though like all of the sound in the room, as though we're hearing it from her perspective. So I think also, as a film that was commercially successful and meant to be entertaining, as a it's a really well crafted film, if I can say that as a filmmaker myself.
Right. And do you think that Carrie influenced the way that you create your films?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that the score of that film is really particular. I mean, even though it is, a film that was made in 1978, it also feels like they wanted to, or the filmmaker wanted to, to sort of like create some lasting and kind of iconic images, right? So it's like
Yeah,
that little, Carrie's sort of like delicate little pink prom dress is very particular, or PJ Soul's little like red ball cap, feels really particular. I mean, the kind of, Piper Laurie in her cape, is also, there's just some like attention to the art direction in this film that really lends to the to the narrative content. And
sure.
I do that so much in my own films. The color palette is very important. The hair and makeup has to be something that feels like it's lending itself to narrative content. I'm not saying that's it's not necessarily given that's the most important thing to a lot of filmmakers, but I think because I started out making films in the art department,
Yeah,
I think it's my influence on visual art is still exists in my films. But yeah, it's really influential. I think about that film, when I'm putting together mood boards, that picture of her covered in blood is always on there.
sure. And I love the fact that without this film, you may not be the Jennifer that we know today.
It's
And
really true.
that's how important these films are to us. My
Mhm.
first horror movie, I was blessed. I grew up in a video store. My parents owned a mom and pop video store, so I was able to watch all the films I wanted. And my first horror movie was House from 1986. And
Ah.
um, if it wasn't for that movie, I would not be the person I am today. I can say that with 100% certainty. So it's amazing. I don't remember the first comedy I watched. I don't remember the first drama or none of that. I remember my first horror movie. That's something I will always remember. So I did say this at the top. I do want to repeat it now. If you haven't already, please make sure you're clicking these social media links down in the description. Make sure you're giving Jennifer a follow so you can stay up to date on everything she has coming up here in the near future and the far future for that matter. Jennifer, please don't go anywhere. I got a couple more questions for you. Everybody else, as always, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.